Further, I want to address a matter of vital national importance. You've all been seeing it, reading it, hearing it, border security. Every nation has not only the right, but the absolute duty to protect its borders and its citizens. A nation without borders is a nation not at all. Without borders, we have the reign of chaos, crime, cartels, and believe it or not, coyotes. I will not surrender this nation to the whims of criminal organizations who prey on the vulnerable, who hurt women and children, and who spread human misery and suffering.
Jackie DeAngelis joins us with a history lesson. Okay, Jackie, you're going to talk to us about when capitalism goes wrong. Give me an example of capitalism going wrong.
There are a couple of examples that people will point out, and that is what I'm doing here today, right? So let's talk about big tech, Facebook, Amazon, Google.
26% approval inside France, and this is the worst riot since the 1960s.
Look, what's happening in France and what's happening to Macron is a lesson for the left in America, for Democrats in America, and a lesson for all democracies. Number one, he's putting up taxes on gasoline and diesel fuel. He is defending the welfare, the cradle-to-grave welfare state. They need money. The economy there is slowing down. He needs money. He wants to impose these taxes.
I've been working for McDonald's for 11 years, and I make $9.50 an hour. No benefits, no paid vacation, no anything, no 401k. I'm never going to be able to retire. Take care of my 84-year-old mom. I have 2 disabled daughters, so I work the graveyard shift so I can take them to their appointments. And I work about 35, 40 hours a week. And it's
how
tough.
much you making now? No.
I had $9.50 after 11 years.
That's beyond disgraceful. Look, I trust. I'm sorry. Did you want to tell me?
My name is Annette, and today was my first time going on strike. And I work for Pizza Hut here in Des Moines, and I also made $9.25 an hour, and it's just not enough to, take care of my 3 boys that I'm trying to raise into men. And I just think that's not right, and we deserve 15. So that's why I'm out here today.
All right, look. Let me give you the good news and the bad news. The good news, which is very good news, is a result of the fight for 15. I want you to hear this because it's important. 4 years ago, when some of us talked about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, we were told that we were crazy, that it was too radical an idea. Okay? Because as you know, the federal minimum wage, the minimum wage here in Iowa is $7.25 now, right? So we said we've got to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. People said, "Oh, you're crazy, you can't do it." Do you know what's happened in the last 4 years? 7 states in the country have raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour because of Fight for 15. That is the reason. People have come together and demanded that if you work 40 hours a week, what all of you are telling me, you can't make it. You can't make it on $7.25. You can't make it on $9. You can't make it on $10 an hour. How much do you pay in rent? Can you tell me?
$700.
How do you afford rent?
Paycheck to paycheck.
Okay. And, people can't afford health care, they can't afford rent, they can't afford transportation, they can't afford, they're not able to put aside a few pennies, into the bank. So, the good news is we've made some progress, and the bad news is we continue to run up against this kind of greed in McDonald's and all of these chains, fast food industry. We had success in taking on Amazon. They raised their minimum wage to $15 an hour. Disney raised their minimum wage to $15 an hour. But we have not cracked yet the fast food industry, and we have not yet cracked Walmart, and we're working on that. So I want you to know you are incredibly brave And the American people overwhelmingly support the idea that if you work 40 hours a week, you should not live in poverty, which is what you guys are struggling for. So the good news is we've made progress. Millions of workers are now earning higher wages than they used to, precisely because of what you're doing. It hasn't come back here yet. All right, but keep up the struggle, and we will work with you. The day is going to come sooner.
Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. We're broadcasting live from downtown Brooklyn, USA, where left is best, as it is everywhere else, with super producer Matt Leck.
Hello.
Chief economist and wrangler David Griscom.
How's it going?
Good, man. How you doing? How's everybody? Everybody good?
I'm good.
On this week's program, Michaela Wilkes. She's challenging Steny Hoyer in the 5th District of Maryland. She would represent in every conceivable policy realm a massive upgrade. We're talking with her about criminal justice reform, single-payer healthcare, and a new, fresh vision of foreign policy. Bernie Sanders sets another gold standard, this time with the best housing package. We've got wealth tax, housing package, Green New Deal, single payer, total medical debt elimination, and student loan elimination. Probably time to stop playing. Then Mike Recine joins us. Very funny comedian, host of the Sit Down with Mike Recine. We're going to be talking about some of his favorite mafia stories, making fun of the ever dreary ideas man, Sam Harris. I guess that is Dave Rubin the ideas man or Sam Harris they're both ideas men.
Dave Rubin's the ideas man. Sam Harris is something else.
He's the thought experiment.
Oh, right.
man.
He's the thought experiment czar.
Well, he's a hysterical man speaking calmly.
He is definitely the hysterical man speaking calmly. We'll have some fun with that. Then we're going to talk about Hollywood and military-industrial complex propaganda while dunking on and mocking Jim from The Office's new horrifying Amazon show, which looks to be written in some type of CIA lab to instigate regime change in Venezuela, some type of upgrade of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Jeremy Corbyn wins his position on Brexit at the Labour Party conference in the UK, even as the UK courts have ruled against blundering Boris, Jair Bolsonaro, Donald Trump, Tayyip Erdogan, and General al-Sisi all address the UN General Assembly in a murderer's role. We'll touch on that, a new apartheid alliance in Israel, a fresh interview with Lula where he talks about the role of the BRICS, Killer Mike doing it for Bernie, and much, much more on the Michael Brooks Show. But first, let's talk about strikes and let's talk about Marx. GM workers are striking. We've talked about it last week. They were the focus of the shout out. And strikes, wherever they take place, are basically the most important political pressure point imaginable for labor, for the 99%, for those who don't have power to exercise the power that they most have, which is literally their physical labor and capacity. You know, Marx centered workers in his economic analysis because of the power capacity of workers to actually strike at the capital class and that dynamic. Obviously, there's a normative desire. He wanted to liberate people from exploitation. And in fact, and I think that this is fair, the kind of classical explanation that Marx is a fusion of English economics, German philosophy, and French politics. What that meant was the technological methodologies coming from economic systems out of England, the French revolutionary politics of that time, going back to the 1770s, as well as to the 1700s, as well as, of course, the German philosophical tradition, which Marx came from through Hegel, but which he secularized. He took a teleological view, which is this idea of spirit or mind manifesting through history, through basically through synthesis and dialectical process, and made it something grounded, right? The slave and master relationship, the feudal and serf relationship, and then the capital and worker relationship. And he saw really the next phase of liberation and an enlargement of what the Enlightenment was, as that if we can liberate people in the formal political and civil realm, why can't we liberate people in the economic realm so that they're really free to exercise their capacities across all domains? And that is the core normative case of Marx, in my view. And then there's a technical analysis and an understanding of power. And workers are centered in that because when workers are amassed as workers, that is the most effective area that they can put a monkey wrench in capital. And strikes are an extraordinary expression of that. The GM strikes have made it very clear how bad, how workers feel about GM, though. GM, I should restate this. GM is perfectly illustrating this power imbalance and this ruthlessness by cutting off healthcare for GM workers while they strike. This is, of course, why an interdependent system of revitalizing labor is another essential component of why we need Medicare for all, single-payer healthcare. This is a cruel tactic that shows why we need workers' power in this country. The stakes are quite literally life and death. There's a two-tiered contract system at GM. It's an example of how defensive many unions have become in recent years. Forcing workers to compete with one another for wages puts the entire working class on the back heel. That's right. There's internal markets inside these global conglomerates that can even internally drive down wages. But this strike and the demand from the United Auto Workers to fight back against these deals show that we might be entering a new era. There's also talk of Kaiser Permanente workers going on strike. There's rumblings across the country. This is coming on the heels of, as I always mention, the incredible teacher strikes going back to Chicago of 2012 and in West Virginia and Oklahoma and California. To strategize the best way to build a future, we want to talk about, and will be beneficial to revisit some of Marx's arguments about the importance of strikes and unions in general. And this is back to the core power dynamic that I was outlining in the beginning. Marx understood the relationship between building union power and building socialism. Unlike some of his quote-unquote socialist contemporaries, and this gets confusing because this is already a broad terminology. At this point in the various internal left bickerings of that time, proving that history is certainly maybe even not cyclical, maybe it's just ongoing. Speaking of annoying left inter-bickering, but with occasional important distinctions. At this point, he was calling people Proudhon, who he's arguing with in this instance, a socialist, and himself a communist. Arguing against Proudhon, Marx wrote that rather than making workers complacent, let me step back. Most of his socialist contemporaries argued that strikes aimed to improve wages for workers was both a distraction and would lead to eventual wage loss. In other words, they were ultimate accelerationist maximalists. There should be no demands inside an oppressive capitalist system. We need to get to the end goal. No intermediary steps. No actual material process. Arguing against Proudhon, Marx wrote that rather than making workers complacent, struggling to secure better wages may help them to demand more, to expand their horizons. We see this dynamic. Bhaskar Sunkara identifies it all the time in the history of democratic socialist government, and even in the context of the New Deal and Great Society. Combination, which were the precursors to unions. So when I quote Marx here saying combination, he's referring to unions, but this is the precursor to unions. Combination always has a double aim, that of stopping competition among the workers so that they can carry on a general competition with the capitalists. That's from The Poverty of Philosophy. Marx was correct. These formations did not simply disappear after a strike was finished, but rather formed into permanent unions. Frederick Engels, too, succinctly stated that one of the most important aspects of unions by proxy strikes was abolishing competitions amongst themselves. Crucially, though, he added, they must go beyond that unless they're prepared to recede again and allow competition among themselves to reappear, and that's Engels on the condition of the working class in England. Workers taking the opportunity to build union power and to change the shape of organized labor in the U.S. goes well beyond the UAW. The recent teachers' strikes, organizing for Uber and Lyft drivers, and other examples show that this movement is growing. And we've also, of course, seen global examples. We saw one great example of union solidarity, actually really from everywhere from Canada to Myanmar. We must take the advice of Marx closely and build out the double aim of organized labor. One, to stop competition between workers, and two, to take that competition to the capitalists. Putting that idea into immediate practice is demanding an end to two-tier contract system at GM and demanding a larger share from the $35 billion that GM has gained in profits. And keep in mind that $35 billion number anytime you hear some pseudo-wonk segment on NPR or elsewhere looking at the legitimate concerns of both sides. This is a raw power asymmetry, and these workers are fighting for their basic lives and survival, and actually through that, for all of us, a just, dignified, and decent life for everyone. Do you guys have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would just add, going back to Marx too, that when we're talking about these kind of concessions that the union movement accepted from GM and also from other capitalist organizations, that really is a function of class power, and the amount of profit that corporations like GM are able to extract from their workers is going to be a function of the amount of power that they have. So going back, to 2008, 2009, when everyone was very afraid of, was dealing with this massive recession and crisis, the capitalists are actually aren't as affected as workers are, because workers are in a situation where now they're worrying about, paycheck to paycheck, losing their job and not having access to the necessities of life, while capitalists are seeing a drop in their bottom line. So it's really important to build these kind of strong working class movements so that when there is crisis or anything that happens, we don't have to give away everything that we have worked so hard to achieve, and that we're able to demand what we deserve in the first place and not have to fall backwards. So building this union power is really important, and also making sure that those unions are reflective of working class interests rather than just union bureaucracy, because that's one thing that we've seen in the past couple of years that's been so successful with these strikes has actually been that it's been rank and file membership that's really been demanding the changes and has been making the shifts that are necessary, rather than people who are living in Washington, D.C. and might not always be, the first ones on the picket line. Well,
look at Randy Weingarten's disastrous, ridiculous comments undermining single payer and the infinitely most pro-labor candidate in the race. I mean, I honestly, I'm somebody who's willing to overlook a bad endorsement in 2016 because of the conditions in place then. But to still be running interference for that in 2019, disaster.
Yeah, I don't have much to say besides highlighting the, and I don't want to rehash anything we talked about last week, but the bureaucratic brakes on mobilization is a problem.
And that just like
organizations that are set up to be the Washington Generals are not part of winning a socialist future.
And talking about what we were talking about last week too, with some of these older organizations versus new organizations like the DSA, I think it's really important.
New old.
That the DSA,
New
yeah,
old.
Exactly. But you go from 2,000 members to 50,000 members.
Yes,
it's pretty much a
right,
new organization.
Right.
But the DSA is pursuing rank and file strategy, so actually encouraging their membership to work in union industries rather than trying to infiltrate the top union bureaucracy, which a lot of left activist groups were trying to do for a long time. It's better to just be with the working class people in the first place.
Do the proper deployments. All right, folks, let's get to the shout-outs.
I'm looking for a remix. And now the shout-out. Valuable shout-out.
The pile of ideas was turned to low. It's quickly moving into the hot position.
And now the shout-out.
Shout-out. Pause the video. Shout-out. Recovery mode.
Shout-out.
My brain is
Shout-out.
Shout-out.
Geopolitical politics.
Shout-out.
Competition would start kicking in.
Shout-out.
I'm not funded by the Koch brothers.
Shout-out.
Do some research for yourself.
Shout-out.
Nice. And I'm sorry, folks, that I'm checking my phone. Sometimes I have to check my phone because of I don't have anything open in front of me in these computers except for Skype. So I need to manage some things, and I want to make sure that we have our first guest.
Yeah. Can I make a note on the do your own research thing Ruben said in that shout out thing there? I noticed that a lot, and that is such a like con man's argument. Because here's the thing, if you want people to do research, give them a series of sources that they can go and check and then test your recommendations against what they later find on their own.
Jesus.
Like, you got to put yourself on the board.
This is like asking Dave to recommend the book he read about slavery.
Yeah, exactly. Dave, can you summarize Eric Foner for me, please? Not
plausible. I mean, I think when we're going to dunk on people, but we're going to give them an assignment, we need to make it remotely plausible. So I've mentioned before in other forums, and I don't like to dwell on it and certainly make any melodrama about it, but housing insecurity is something I dealt with for most of my life. And, in various ways, shapes, and forms, I know plenty of people who had it much worse. I know a fair amount of people who had it a hell of a lot easier and don't understand the enormous physical and psychological pressures of even being evicted or of, not thankfully, never actually, that line was crossed into, I guess being without a home when I was quite young and at other points. But even knowing that that's a plausible scenario takes an enormous psychological and physical toll. And Bernie Sanders' housing plan, which is the shout out, and I will use the shout out frequently to point out that Bernie Sanders is not only putting more points on the board than anybody else in the race, he's putting more points on the board than anybody in modern American politics. What's happening is that in 2019, because of the success of his 2016 campaign, because of the broader organic formations happening, he gets to have permission to revert to type. This is his politics. He is a democratic socialist. He does have these commitments. That's why he's willing to move so aggressively and propose things like building millions of affordable new housing units, just building them straight up. I'm quoting now from his website. In 2001, Bernie first introduced legislation to create the National Affordable Housing Trust Fund, based largely on the success of the Vermont Housing and Conservation Trust Fund. After a 15-year effort, in 2016, a modest version of Bernie's legislation became the first new federal affordable housing program funded in several decades. Moving on, he will, when he's president, he'll invest $1.48 trillion over 10 years in the National Affordable Housing Trust Fund to build, rehabilitate, and preserve 7.4 million quality, affordable, and accessible housing units to eliminate the affordable housing gap, which will remain affordable in perpetuity. Units constructed with this funding will be eligible to be located in mixed income developments. He'll invest an additional $400 billion to build 2 million mixed income social trust units to be administered through the National Affordable Housing Trust Fund. He'll revitalize our public housing stock. Across the country, public housing is in disrepair. It threatens people's health. It's a disaster. It's a raw expression of classism. And racism. He's going to pump billions to clean it up. 70 billion. He's going to make rent affordable. And this is the one I hear. I hear like, well, actually, rent control is problematic because blah, 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 blah. Let's be real. And I'll talk more about this in the future when we have more time. PC Magazine published a great piece in 2015. And I'm paraphrasing the title, but it was a lot of the problems that economists warn about with rent control are not observable in reality. And I love that quote. That pretty much distills all of my politics. Rent control saves people's homes right now in New York City, to the extent that there are still working class and middle class families that can live in a decent neighborhood anywhere. I mean, I forget anywhere. And by decent, I mean accessible remotely to where they work, or maybe just where they grew up, and a house hasn't been completely priced out. It's because of rent controls. That's it. And then other people will say, oh, no, if you have rent controls, then we'll stop market incentives to create public, greater lower income housing. Of all of these various cockamamie Rube Goldberg schemes to create public housing options, to create affordable housing through market incentives, through giving away an obscene amount of breaks and bennies and everything else to the real estate industry, which is one of the most predatory, pernicious, dangerous on earth. Let's just ask a big picture question. Don't wonk out. Don't get nerdy. Maybe we could do that some other time. We'll go more into housing policy. Is there a major city in the United States where any of that approach has done anything to stop the housing crisis? Rot of neoliberalism. New York, San Francisco, LA, no. Now, if you want to follow the logic and say, hey, I don't care if people are priced out, move to the exurbs, okay? Then you can be honest about your politics, but we have a different value set. So I know a combination of a serious public housing option like we have in Austria and mass upgrades, the opportunity for low-income people to own homes combined with rent control. Yes, rent control is absolutely essential for fighting back and reversing this tide. That's what I know in reality, not hypothetical wonk problems that most people, again, look, you know, most of you who, you're not Paul Krugman either, right? Like you're just speculating. I'm talking about actual reality of how things work in a city like New York, where people are able to keep onto homes and part of an actual strategy. He also has restitution for people dealing with foreclosures and has aggressive plans for desegregation to combat gentrification and exclusionary zoning. And there's way more. Like every other bill and legislation he's put forward, it's not just the best and the most progressive. It's from a completely different planet. And I'll keep going with the same mantra. I hope people will get serious and not squander this literally once in a lifetime opportunity. Because this ain't coming up again on a federal level anytime remotely soon. And if Bernie doesn't do it this time, you think it's been enough of a struggle to get him in the front and center of of national life. Think about how difficult it will be to replicate. So let's get serious. Shout out Housing for All, Bernie Sanders. All right, let's talk about the Philly live show. November 23rd. That is the week before Thanksgiving. Don't worry, there's no Thanksgiving problems. Hopefully we can get this up on screen. We are doing a live show in the city of brotherly love. I'm incredibly excited to go to Philly. Is there a street named after your rabble-rousing
That's
family?
where the Griscoms first came to the United States.
The Griscoms first came.
Yeah, and there's a Griscom Street in Philadelphia. I can't remember exactly where. I don't think it's the most sightly place, but we're definitely going to go to it.
Yeah, we're definitely going to go to it. We got to get those pictures. We're at the World Cafe, November 23rd. The guests include Crystal Ball, Emma Vigeland, and Artesia Balthra. I couldn't be more excited about this. I could not be more excited about this show. I always say this, and you never know. I mean, people have been at the case where, where it's hard at the door. They're going super fast for this one. So I'd get them today. You get your $75 ticket. You'll hang out with all of us beforehand. It's going to be a really fun show. In addition to that, I want to recommend, obviously, to everybody become a patron today. Patreon.com/TMBS. That's how this whole thing happens. It's how we grow out our content. This past couple of weeks, we've done illicit histories of Robert Mugabe, an illicit history of social democracy. The post games are incredibly fun. You're going to laugh a lot with Mike Recine tonight. Upcoming guests on this show include Richard Wolff, of course, is coming back, not in the not too distant future. Anna Kasparian, Crystal Ball. I don't know the date yet, but I believe Abby Martin is going to be joining us. Excited about her making her debut. Many other folks. But the foundation is your Patreon support that allows for the main show, the depth and range that we cover in this show alone. The main show is basically conservatively a $5 a month patron in and of itself. And then you get a full post game and really in-depth Sunday shows. Plus, at 21 and above, you get the video illicit histories from time to time that we do with Vic Viana. We have a new one dropping in a couple days on Jamaica. This weekend for 21 and above, an organizing conference call with the great Joshua Kahn. Patreon.com/TMBS. Patreon.com/TMBS. We're well on our way. I think we'll get to 3,000 patrons next month. Let's do it, folks. We'll be right back with Michaela Wilkes. Let's get her into Congress. Am I off?
You see people's feedback loops interrupted.
It produced an overwhelming sense of impending doom.
Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. We don't do a lot of these interviews. We're going to be doing some, but when we do it, we're really focusing on people who are running for Congress, running to change Congress, who really bring something radically different to the table in terms of policy, energy, ideas. Connie-Ella Ng, Shahid Buttar, as an example. And tonight, I'm really excited to welcome Michaela Wilkes. She's running in the 5th District of Maryland. She's challenging Steny Hoyer. Now, honestly, if you told me a kind of mediocre person was challenging Steny Hoyer, I would support them. But in Mckayla, this is a great candidate. So I'm really excited and I'm honored to have you, Michaela Wilkes. Thanks for being on with us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Mckayla, we might play a little bit of your opening ad. But before we do that, what inspired you to take this plunge to run for Congress? Why are you challenging Steny Hoyer? Where are you coming from?
Well, because we need representation that's more beholden to our interests rather than corporate interests, which, quite frankly, I feel like we've been getting for the past almost 40 years. There are people in my community, myself included, that feel that we're forgotten in the conversations that are being had in Congress. We're forgotten when the people that we elect, the people that we trust, does not support legislation that would benefit us. They'd rather support legislation that would benefit the ones who contributes large amounts of money to them, which are usually corporate donors. And that's just unacceptable. You know, we elect these people, we trust these people. These are people that we voted for. And even if we didn't vote for them, these are people that the community has voted for. And any representative or any person that's in the Senate or any elected position that people have appointed, that have selected them to be in, when they forget about our interests, their time is up. And it just so happens to be that time for Steny Hoyer.
I love that. Let's play a little bit of this ad. This is one of the most honest, direct political communications I've seen. Let's just play about 30, 40 seconds of it, and then maybe I'll throw back to you to elaborate on it. But I want to play a little bit of this. This is a very powerful ad that you put out to announce your candidacy.
I didn't think that I would be where I am today. Chances are that I should be unemployed, in jail, or probably even worse. I'm running for Congress for Maryland's 5th District, but getting here has definitely not been easy. When I was 15, I was placed in juvenile detention facilities for running away from home. There was even one instance where a guard threatened to hold me down and cut my braids out if I didn't cut them out myself. I was even jailed for driving on a suspended license. I was 7 months pregnant, living paycheck to paycheck. I couldn't afford to pay all my tickets and court fees, and I had no choice but to drive or I'd lose my job. We need a criminal justice system that offers rehabilitation instead of exploitation. This is why I want to end cash bail. I want to end the failed war on drugs, and I want to
talk about your experience, how that leads to ending the war on drugs, rehabilitate, everything you outlined there. You put it all on the table.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about criminal justice reform and we see how things are essentially criminalized, poverty, substance abuse, mental health issues, things that we should be offering people rehabilitation for. We should take a more realistic approach towards it. And simply putting someone in prison or locking someone up for as simple as possession of marijuana, or, I mean, even possession of heroin or crack or cocaine. You know, if you've been incarcerated 5 times for the same thing, clearly prison is not working for you. You need treatment. And that is the kind of criminal justice system we need to have. And my experience has showed me that. My experience alone, being incarcerated for the inability to pay for traffic violations, just showed me how low we've come with our criminal justice system, and how, in fact, I know a lot of the times I say that it's broken, but it's actually fixed because it's working the exact way that it's intended to for the exact people that it's working for at this current moment in time.
Absolutely.
And even just women being there that were stuck because they couldn't afford, $100 or $150 of bail money, which is not a lot to some people. But it was just devastating because it's like you have to call someone to bail you out, and you can't even call anyone because the phones, they cost. Yeah. And I just think that that's something that we need to change. I mean, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's obscene. Can you take us more into that? I really want people to understand, and I think there was some reporting that was highlighted in the context of understanding the uprising in Ferguson that focused on basically how, let's use the black part of town as a cash cow for, in fact, the wealthier parts of town by making just living a finable offense. But that's a national thing. So can you talk about, and again, there's levels of extreme, but I remember one time getting driven to school. My dad couldn't pay a fine, got pulled over. All of a sudden, instead of that, the car is being towed, right? Now, we were taken back home. It wasn't such a big deal, but it sucks. And this is a huge, maybe talk about, if you can, your own experience a little bit more, but also just how far ranging, things even before we get to bail, people, getting caught up for essentially not being able to pay fines and being fined for things they shouldn't be fined for to begin with, frankly.
Yeah. So, in my experience, the entire thing was very dehumanizing, to say the least. Just from being an average person, things happen. You get pulled over, you get tickets, you can't pay them, your license is suspended. Oh, well, you go to jail. And for me, just having that whole experience was devastating. I was asked by the judge, why were you driving? And me being the honest person that I am, I explained to the judge, yes, I was wrong. I, told him I have to get to work. I was pregnant at the time. Right. I had a son already. And I was just like, I have to go to work. I have a child on the way. I have a home. I can't just not drive. And he wasn't empathetic at all. He gave me an ultimatum: either you pay $1,000 in fines or 13 points on your license, which is a revocation of your license, which is, I don't, that part. But and I was told that I could either have that option or the option to do 2 nights in jail. Now, remember, I just told him that I couldn't even afford to pay the tickets. And you say we'll pay $1,000. He knew where it was going to go. And we're missing that personal connection when it comes to criminal justice reform. I mean, everything is about money. Everything is so systemic and oppressive to certain people. And that is what I've learned in my experience going through this.
And Steny Hoyer has been a voice for the criminalization of everything, correct?
Correct.
What about healthcare? You're running on Medicare for All. Can you talk about that dimension as well?
Yeah, so I'm running on Medicare for All or nothing because we cannot accept middle ground on something such as healthcare. Our healthcare should not be a commodity. Our bodies, our lives are not a commodity, and it shouldn't be treated as such. Everyone deserves the right to health care, and it shouldn't depend on whether you're employed or whether you can pay for it. And even if you can pay for it, there's no reason why you should have a high freaking deductible and still not even be 100% covered and still have to pay astronomical prices for prescription medicine or even preventative medicine for regular checkups. I mean, our healthcare system is broken. Myself, I was diagnosed with deep vein thrombosis. I had a blood clot behind each leg and one in my lung. And I spent about 2 weeks in the hospital with my physician basically arguing with my insurance company to pay for it or I was going to die.
And that was, yeah. I mean, it's just so like when you look and you know, you don't have to go wherever you want. I'm trying to goad you to attack Steny Hoyer because I like that. But when you look at somebody like Steny Hoyer and what he represents and the corporate connections, and you talk about like your deep understanding of these issues on a policy and personal level, what does that whole leadership represent to you in terms of like, what has the man done representing the 5th District for decades? Like, where is that translating as supposedly a progressive Democratic leader?
Yeah. I mean, clearly he's representing his corporate donors, and that's the issue. He's not representing us. And I think that we just needed somebody had to step up and, you know, bring this to light, like this is happening because he's been on our ballot for so long. Right. He's been our representative for so long. So it's kind of like he's basically a household name. Like it's Steny, he's been there. But people are noticing now. People are noticing. I can't tell you how many times when I go door knocking and I hear constituents and I tell them, you know, I talk to them about healthcare and I'm like, well, Steny doesn't support that. And then they'll say to me, really, why not? And then you get into the money and then you get into the money and you make people aware and people notice now.
What made you step up? Like, when did you actually decide that you were going to take this race?
Okay, so unofficially, I decided that I wanted to run for Congress years ago when I started to see that our criminal justice system, the things that were happening was bigger than the individual. Because I initially wanted to work as a psychologist, to work in prisons and juvenile detention centers, to talk to the prisoners until I, you know, saw for myself, this is a whole systemic issue. And from that point on, I switched my major to political science. I started to look into legislation. I started to look into the record of our representative. And I would say I officially decided that I wanted to run for Congress in 2018 because for a long time, I thought that in order for me a credible candidate, I would have to have a degree. I would have to, you know, work in political work. But seeing the progressive wave in 2018 and seeing people like AOC win and Ayanna Pressley, it let me know that regular working people can win. And that's what ultimately motivated me to file and run to represent Maryland's 5th.
That's so awesome. And I have to say, I'll do my usual. This actually is one of the reasons that I talk about Lula so much. I think it is significant that the best president that Brazil had, and an incredible international president, was a union worker who never went to college. And, you know, in his recent letter to the Labor Party youth wing, he said, you know, part of my mission is to prove that working people across the globe can govern themselves.
Yes.
You're also talking about foreign policy a lot in your own experiences around basically growing up like in the DC, Maryland, you know, area and connections with the Pentagon and so on. How do you look at yourself in relation to winding down military engagements, stopping war, like cutting military spending? Like what are you like? How are you positioning yourself and thinking about those issues?
Yeah, so I think that that we need an anti-imperialist policy of peace and cooperation. You know, we need to divest from wars. I personally think that we need to repurpose our military instead of using them for acts of war, because that's hurting no one except for, you know, our people that are in the military, and then also other people who are living in poverty, Black and brown, and other nations that that we've been in. And as far as me, yes, I have worked at the Pentagon. I do still work for the Department of Defense, but it doesn't cloud my judgment at all. You know, I personally would like to create an economy where we don't have to depend on jobs such as ones in the military industrial complex, so that we can have jobs that are affordable and we won't have to necessarily take those kinds of jobs.
And so that you could actually, like, I've heard you talk in the past specifically about the idea that when you start cutting defense spending and reinvesting it in like a peace economy,
yes,
that creates a whole different wave of middle-class jobs, basically.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Would you advocate for freeing President Lula? I have to ask every single person running for Congress about that. That's a big one for me.
Yeah, I absolutely would advocate for freeing Lula. Honestly, I think the charges against him are trumped up. I think that this is all, I think that he's being used as a target to get their current president that they have now of Brazil. Mm-hmm. So I definitely would support advocating for Lula. Absolutely.
Mckayla, how can people help with your campaign? And what's the feeling on the ground as you do this?
Oh, the feeling on the ground is amazing. It's almost therapeutic in a sense. I love going out into the community, talking to people. We've been knocking doors like crazy, public canvassing, getting in touch with communities that are politically disengaged because they feel like our political system does not care about them. I mean, just going out and just spreading the energy and actually organizing on the ground is amazing. It's the best part of this campaign.
It's awesome. How can people help you?
So people can help me, of course. We're always taking contributions because we are grassroots. We do not take any money from any corporate PACs. You can always send a contribution through my website, Mckayla2020.com/donate.
And do you have one of the Gravel kids helping you out? Is that true?
Yeah, I actually do. His name is Dylan Burns. He's amazing. Shout out to Dylan.
Shout out to Dylan Burns.
Yes.
That's awesome. I love how all of these things intersect.
I love him. He's actually our foreign policy advisor.
Oh, well, Lula Livre, Dylan.
Yeah.
Michaela Wilkes, this is so awesome. I remember several months ago now actually seeing your announcement ad and saying, maybe even to myself, because I don't even remember who was in the room, but like, we need to help her. So it's awesome seeing you do this. Godspeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.
Bye.
All All right, folks, definitely follow up on all those links. I mean, I like that we've also talked to Shah. I like that we've had on the two great progressive left challengers to the two quintessential examples of utter democratic institutional failure. Let me just say briefly, because it dropped today, this impeachment thing. And if you missed it, Kyle Kulinski and I talked about it. We did a YouTube stream. If you're listening to this later on pod, go to the YouTube channel, check it out, or maybe watch it later. So we did go a little bit more into detail. I think the best thing about impeachment is time monopolization. I'm totally convinced by that argument. I love the idea.
Presidential harassment.
It's presidential harassment. It's totally unfair. I've been quoted as saying anything that gets the cortisol flowing through that bastard's body, I support. So I'm down. Now, what I am not down with is the smelling salts version of the argument. At some point outside of this Sorkin resistance world, we need to get that we have a two-tier justice system and an insanely, I won't even say corrupted because of my problems with that word, but a fundamentally unjust political system.
Meritocracy.
A meritocracy, precisely. Yeah, I just want to see, this is great. David Feldman, man, we got to get David Feldman on the show. Feldman really knows how to nail this. Oh my God, David Feldman, the brilliant David Feldman. Subscribe to his podcast now, The David Feldman Show. Nancy Pelosi didn't want to impeach, but once Trump crossed the Rubicon by trying to make it hard for the children of Democratic leadership to earn $600,000 lobbying for a foreign government, it became personal. Yes, Feldo, exactly. So, and Kyle outlined this brilliant thing which shows just how obscene and dysfunctional our system is because it will never happen. But the point that, here's how you go after Trump. Why are Saudi officials paying overpriced prices to stay at your DC hotels, and then you are vetoing congressional efforts to stop the U.S. co-participation in and fueling of arms sales to fund the Saudi genocide in Yemen? How about an impeachment on genocide? How about an impeachment on being an aider and abettor to genocide? So that's the substantive critique. Now, what concerns me about a political process, I think, honestly, in terms of mobilization, it might be a wash. I think Trump's people already feel constantly aggrieved and victimized, and he's going to say that no matter what, so it's a wash. And I think in a good sense, I think it panics him, which I like. And I think it will motivate some Democrats. So that the politics of it, I think, could go either way. Now, if this is an incentive to spend the next several months with more deadly, dull, boring Democratic testimonials where they don't even have a strategy to embarrass these fucking people, and that's a distraction from Bernie talking about income inequality and climate, that's bad. That's really bad. So, I mean, that's it. And really, honestly, as I said from the beginning, if the attitude is Rashida Tlaib, let's impeach the motherfucker, I support it. If the attitude is, how dare you, sir, I oppose it. Because they all dare. Trump is just the most blunt version of the dare. And, while I'm on the subject of being a little bit irritated by this stuff, look, I have said every day, and I will continue to say, there's even some people, some of my friends on the left do not acknowledge and appreciate the incredible cultural and leadership role that Barack Obama played, almost definitionally, right? In fact, definitionally, the man is the first African-American president. That is a standalone in this society. I want that always to be acknowledged, and I want a fundamental humanity respected, and that's very important to remember. Now I'm going to do a hit on policy. When I see this young woman out protesting, out articulating her truth on the climate crisis, Greta Thunberg, I'm sorry, is it Thunberg or Thornburg?
I think Thunberg, actually.
Thunberg. I apologize. Greta Thunberg. You know, when I see her shaking hands with Obama, and this is, be extremely clear, this is a pure criticism of Obama. Okay. We'll take on some of this courageous child's moral glamour. But, you know, weatherizing some houses didn't do the job. The Paris deal did not do the job by the metrics of the science we have established itself, even remotely. And you are a promoter of fracking and of trade agreements that are disastrous for ecology. And you open drilling areas and you even relax pollution standards. And I say this not to make a litany about Obama. I say this because, honestly, in the grotesqueness of Trump waddling by her at the UN, there's a greater honesty. You know, Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau actually took off some makeup to congratulate her. He was in the middle of preparing for a costume party to relax. Justin Trudeau runs a petrostate and has not done a damn thing substantively to reverse Canada's contributions to the climate crisis. And in fact, has been an enemy of Indigenous sovereignty. And the Indigenous sovereignty dimension is inseparable from any serious strategy on ecology and climate. Joshua Kahn, shouts to him. He's deeply educated me on that, among others. So I bring that together because the politics of "how dare you, sir," are done. All of these people have dared. And yes, that's another problem with the Ukraine thing. If Donald Trump said, "I will not release a piece of foreign aid for you without political dirt," I mean, look, I'm not sure how far that is from a lot of other political practice, to be honest with you. But yeah, that would be a problem. But here's the other problem. There's dirt. That's a problem. This Biden stuff in Ukraine is almost guaranteed to be a real story. And it's another example of "how dare you" combined with, well, what about some of the shit you dared? And you see that in the climate performativity. Justin Trudeau has the gall to try to clout chase this young woman. Amy Klobuchar, I mean, we'll do that in the post game. Honestly, Amy Klobuchar is so delusional, it's almost more charming. But if you don't have an actual indictment that's an actual indictment, that's systemic, it's just hand-waving about Trump, I think we start not only not dealing with the fact that the earth is uninhabitable. Oh, Jesus Christ. All right, you know what? When I see Amy Klobuchar dancing like this, I'm almost willing to give her a pass because this is just so embarrassing. Oh, the humanity. I'm going to show my humor. If you make me look bad in the dance, I'll shove a fucking sign up your ass.
This is going to be visual, so
yeah, this is definitely visual.
But you want to
emphasis on the visual.
She does one of these jobbies, which is the clap where your hand.
Right. Yep. She's definitely doing the. I have to say, George W. Bush looked better in West Africa. I'm not even kidding. Straight up. He at least had a certain you know what? As Wyatt Coke said, it's just as long as you do it with passion, would apply to George Bush at the drum circle.
That doesn't apply to dancing.
It does. Well, fair enough. I agree. So, and it's summarized in this Feldman tweet. So spare us the sanctimony. And if impeachment is just a vehicle of sanctimony, it could be a political loser. If it's a vehicle of let's get in this guy's face, throw some elbows, cool. All right, let's get to the gym.
Yeah. Well, to talk about a part of the world that's not going to be making that sound too much in the near future, I really wanted to cover the decline that's been going on in Germany and also show an example of what not to do when you come into political power. So just to set the stage for folks who might not be familiar with it, Germany, which is for a long time has been the powerhouse of Europe throughout all of this decline over the past few years, has now really been hit. Since 2018, there has been significant decline in German GDP. Their industrial output, especially in manufacturing, has been steadily declining as well. And for a country that depends so much on manufacturing and on exports, this is very, very significant. Now, obviously, a large part of this has to do with the international climate through Trump's trade wars and Brexit. But you also start to see that this real significant German aversion, and specifically the aversion of Merkel, to pursuing any kind of fiscal stimulus, if it means that there's going to be any need to borrow money, is starting to really hit them. And where you can see this so significantly is in this really sad, honestly, it's just sad, green plan that they just passed through. So Germany has made, commitments to change their energy policy, but they're really doing it in the wrong ways. Exactly the kind of thing that when we talk about why Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal is so important and so powerful, this is exactly the wrong kind of Green New Deal. So what it's done is it significantly increased the cost of electricity, which means that working class people are, overly burdened with it. It also hurts businesses, too, because they're having to pay for significant amounts of money. To pay for their electric bills. And at the same time, they're moving away from coal and from nuclear, and the workers in those industries aren't having the benefit of a just transition. So people are, losing their jobs from this transition. So recently they just passed a new $60 billion climate plan. And of course, this deal is balanced throughout, meaning that they're not going to borrow any money, even though in Europe they could virtually borrow money from the ECB for free, because the interest rates are so low. So everything that's going to go on is there's going to be higher taxes on fuel, and there's going to be some tax credits if you start to transition over to having an electric vehicle. Germany still is predominantly not only do they use fossil fuels, they predominantly use diesel for a lot of their cars. So there's a real cultural aversion so far to electric cars there. Now, it's also trying to use incentives to encourage a slow green transition. And the reason that they can't do anything bold is because of this desire to be budget neutral. But even in its most, even when they're trying to sell this plan, it's really timid. Germany only plans to get out of coal production by 2037. Obviously, that's way too far down the line. And this has a really significant effect when you see the massive climate protests that happened in Germany recently. In fact, a poll just came out in Germany that 63% of Germans support climate policy, even if it comes at an economic loss for their society. I mean, people... well, because people recognize how serious this situation is. And, a big part of this, of course, is carbon pricing, which we really need to move away from. Basically, we have a crisis that's been created by the market. And this idea that we're going to be able to create a new market that's going to be able to incentivize it outside of the climate crisis is absolutely wrong. And this is why this is so dangerous, is because what you've seen in Germany over the past few years is the rise of the far right. In recent state elections, the AfD had significant gains. And what happens when you start putting environmental policy on the backs of working class people, they rebel and they try to vote for somebody who's going to punish the people in power. And when that vote is going to a very dangerous right-wing party, you are in absolute trouble, especially when there is so much political will in the country to go forward with a much larger and more powerful and more significant green plan. This is why, not only do we need to advocate for a Green New Deal in the United States, but as the international left, we really need to be making sure that we're using this opportunity that we have to reorient our economy away from fossil fuels as a way to create a just transition that radically redistributes wealth in society and have an upfront benefit for workers. For the people in Germany who are struggling right now and are looking towards these right-wing parties, you can give them a policy plan that gives them good jobs, that gives them higher wages, and that helps them transform the country, rather than doing this plan, which is just making people have to pay more,
already people who are struggling to get by in the first place, and then they start to resent you for it, and it is absolutely the thing that we do not want to see at all going forward.
100%.
And just so people understand the global importance of
this is Bloomberg Macronism of green, which will destroy it. It won't solve the problem, and it will feed the political projects of the Bannons, Bolsonaro, Trumps, and other thugs of the world.
Exactly, and there's a far-right movement.
And the AFD in Germany specifically.
Yeah, no, it's like, and there's a far-right movement all across Europe, and this kind of timid old politics just doesn't work anymore. And we really need to move away from this fantasy that we're just going to be able to have balanced budgets forever.
The safe option is not the safe option.
Yeah.
That's like the bottom line. We have another segment. The great Mike Recine has just entered. We're going to talk about a few things that happened at the UN General Assembly. Mike really wanted to talk about General al-Sisi. He's got a major bone to pick with that guy. But we'll do this quick segment, and we'll keep going with the rest of the show. But then we'll have Mike come on. But I want to just do, in the post game, we'll check in on West Papua, which we covered a couple weeks ago, Iran, and some other important things that happened at the UN General Assembly. Trump's speech. He looked like he popped 50 Xanax. He looked like Jordan Peterson stumbling out of rehab. He was exhausted. He was low energy. It was a combination of George W. Bush neoconservative talking points and threats on Iran with like some primo YouTube right-wing pablum and threats against refugees and a confirmation of the war on refugees and immigrants across this country, which is the only area where there's actually been policy coherence in the Trump administration. But this guy really was like, hey, you know what? First of all, Donald Trump is funny and has a certain bizarre charm. I've got none of that. And if you're going to be low energy this year, I will take the charmless, retrograde, charisma-free, weirdo portion of the day. And by the way, this is on the same lineup. General Sisi, who's facing a huge anti-austerity uprising in Egypt after brutally running that country for several years in a coup, he mainly talked about economic partnerships with sub-Saharan Africa. Okay? But J.R. Bolsonaro, the clown fascist jackass moron embarrassment to the world, advised by Steve Bannon.
Fascist Carl Sagan.
Fascist Carl Sagan. I just want to be clear. This is like in the first 2 minutes of the speech. We barely got even through all of it. Just to give you a flavor.
This is at 1:19.
This is 1:19 in the speech, and he already goes in. This guy, and let's be real, he's just a pawn of Western capital interests, but also of the ranchers and other elements in Brazil. This guy's in charge of the Amazon. He later, of course, said the Amazon fires were essentially fake news, but here it is.
I come here before you today to introduce you to a new Brazil, a country that is now re-emerging after coming from the brink of socialism, a country that is being rebuilt on the yearnings and ideals of its people. Under my administration, Brazil has been working to regain world trust and also to lower unemployment, violence and business risks by reducing bureaucracy through deregulation and especially by leading through example. My country was very close to socialism, which led us to a situation of widespread corruption, serious economic recession, high crime rates, and continuous ceaseless attacks against family and religious values that are part and parcel of our traditions. In 2013, an agreement between the former Workers' Party and the Cuban dictatorship brought to Brazil 10,000 doctors who had no evidence of professional training. They were
Now, there are other parts of the speech that are crazier, but I just want to just really underline that just like literally out of the gate, he's just giving at the UN. Like even Trump will try at the UN, certainly others. We're going to play the rest of it, to calibrate their domestic message with some notion of international respectability. Gone. And of course, I mean, his foreign minister rants about cultural Marxists. His son was just photographed again with Steve Bannon. But the first actual tangible part of his speech, other than conspiracies and lies and pablum about the Workers' Party, is attacking Cuba for a program that literally benefited at a minimum tens of thousands of poor Brazilians in a bizarre conspiracy theory. Here's more.
10,000 doctors who had no evidence of professional training. They were prevented from bringing their spouses or children. And 75% of their wages were confiscated by the Cuban regime. And they were further prevented from enjoying fundamental rights, such as, for example, the right to go and come. Truly tantamount to slave labor.
All right. So, yeah, this guy, I mean, they're all listening to Ben Shapiro podcast. So this guy, and again, just to be clear, and we'll cover this more in the coming weeks, this administration, there are murders of indigenous leaders. There's murders of landless workers. The former president is a political prisoner. They are sniping poor neighborhoods and advocating for policies that will allow for farmers to murder activists and poor people and indigenous people. So that's what's actually happening. And the Amazon is still burning. And this is the direct outgrowth of Western financial interests, of Wall Street, of Monsanto, and all these other corporate interests that were willing to destroy a modern, successful social democratic government to help facilitate, through a corrupt DOJ-backed investigation, this fucking embarrassment being president of Brazil. Now, I want to just play and first look, just do the Ruben, man, and then we'll get to this other thing.
What is your opinion on Brazilian Prime Minister Bolsonaro regarding, there's a lot of things moving here, deforestation of the rainforest? P.S. I'm a Christian, I bake you a cake, though. I don't know enough about him, but it sounds like he really hates Marxism, and he's really pushing Brazil to become more of a world leader, and that he actually is for capitalism, and he's trying to get some of the SJW stuff out of the schools. I just saw a tweet by him a day or two ago. So on that front, and I don't know a ton about him. That all sounds good to me. And as a Christian, I appreciate your offer to bake me a cake.
I think, I think even in the last couple of months, more courage of Dave Rubin's convictions if the reporting from Canada is true. I'm not sure. I have to double check, but I've heard reports that Dave might be doing some type of event with a alt-right party in Canada, but I need that confirmed for me from my Canadian sources. This was an interview with former President Lula. I'm going to play two clips of, this is important. And at this point, I'm playing these Lula clips, one, because he is a political prisoner. He's the most prominent political prisoner in the world. Everybody besides Bernie Sanders needs to be calling for his immediate release. But also because in these interviews, I mean, this guy is a key strategist of our moment for how to actually build durable progressive governance, and someone with a lot of lessons that he's speaking incredibly open about from his own experience. And this is an interesting interview because this was done by Pepe Escobar for the Asia Times and some other reporters who are left, right? So this is like the most clear aligned. These are people who understand the success of the Workers' Party. They are interested in hearing President Lula's thoughts. There's not a lot of dumb, sort of Brazilian right-wing talking points. And everybody who's been following the show knows the facts of the case. And if you don't, please go into our archives and read the Brazil Wire as well as the Lava Jato leaks in The Intercept to understand Lula as a political prisoner as well as his enormous success as the president of Brazil. This clip is fascinating because if you recall years ago, it was, and they still meet, the BRICS still meet, Brazil, China, South Africa, Russia. But there was a much more ambition around this group in the Lula era. And there was critiques from the left. Is this just an alternative formation of capitalism representing the developing world? Yes, that was true, and those critiques were valid. And certainly the export and resource dependency of all four of those economies in terms of minerals, soybeans, agriculture, oil, and so on, covering those four countries. But you could also see here, and I think President Lula is speaking much more openly now about how aggressive and visionary what at least Brazil wanted to do to the BRICS. Now, I'll just say, if you're listening to this podcast, I'll be responding to what he's saying here, but this is subtitled, it's in Portuguese, so you might want to watch this on YouTube.
Eu imaginava, o BRICS não foi criado para ser um instrumento de defesa, mas para ser um instrumento de ataque. Tá? O BRICS foi criado para que a gente pudesse criar uma moeda própria, para não ficar dependendo do dólar nas nossas relações comerciais, sabe, que a gente poderia ter, para criar o Banco de Desenvolvimento que foi criado, mas ainda está muito tímido, sabe, para criar uma coisa muito forte. E para a gente ajudar no desenvolvimento da parte do mundo mais pobre. Era essa a lógica da existência do BRICS. É fazer algo diferente. Não é ficar copiando. E os Estados Unidos tinham muito medo, porque quando eu discuti esse negócio da moeda, o Obama uma vez me telefonou perguntando: vocês estão querendo criar uma nova moeda, criar um novo euro? Não, eu falei: eu estou querendo apenas me livrar do dólar. Eu estou querendo apenas não ser dependente. Eu vou vender uma caixa de fósforo para a Bolívia, eu tenho que comprar dólar. Sabe?
Mas essa é a base do império, presidente.
Por que eu não posso fazer na minha moeda? Mas é engraçado é que no tempo do Bush, ele aceitava essas conversas com mais fluidez do que o Obama. O Obama foi muito mais duro com relação ao Brasil. Eu tenho certeza que a carreira de Clinton não gosta da América Latina e não gostava do Brasil.
Claro que não.
Tá? Tenho certeza disso.
Ela bombardeou o acordo que o senhor fez com o Erdogan e Ahmadinejad.
Eu tive duas brigas com ela, uma numa reunião que nós fizemos lá em Trinidad e Tobago, e outra em Copenhague. Ela chega atrasada, chega depois de 3 dias, chega querendo mandar. Você está na janela? Calma, senhora, calma. Espera a sua vez, pô, eu estou aqui, sabe, há 3 dias aqui. Então, é assim, a petulância, a arrogância dos americanos me incomoda muito. Me incomoda muito. Se bem que eu acho que os Estados Unidos é um país sempre importante e que a gente tem que manter sempre uma boa relação com os Estados Unidos. Então eu imaginava um BRICS mais agressivo, mais proativo, mais criador, sabe? Porque o mundo precisa de alguém que, olha, já que tinha caído o Império Russo, vamos criar um Império Democrático, tá?
Since the Russian Empire is dead, let's create a democratic empire. So that's the type, I mean, just the depth of his strategic thinking is extraordinary. And if the BRICS were that political project, that's a vision of a counterweight that isn't just a counterweight to U.S. empire and hegemony, but a proactive and positive one, right? I mean, that's the problem with some of the China and Russian narratives is like, of course there needs to be a counterweight to the United States, but what is it actually proposing? A BRIC foundation, one, the way Lula articulated, would be for a infinitely more just world geared towards the interests of the working and the poor. This second clip, though, is important because as we continue to cover China more, and I make no bones about my criticisms of China, I'm not an apologist for the Chinese system. I'm not an apologist for China's rights abuses. What's happening with the Uyghurs, as an example, is not a myth. That's a very real and horrific thing. The occupation of Tibet is a real and horrific thing, and so on and so forth. However, in the developing world, there is a huge amount of appreciation in some areas for China. There's an appreciation for Chinese currency. There's appreciation for some Chinese business partnerships. And there's an understanding that China carries itself with radically less hypocrisy than the United States and the European partners so far. And this specifically manifests in areas like climate. Of course, China needs to do a lot on climate. But when people try to shift the burden on them, just as with technology transfer, they are not recognizing the scope of empire, of industrialization, and how we got where we are. This story from Copenhagen that Lula tells, where he had China's back in this argument, and I entirely agree with him here, is fascinating and I think very revealing of a certain BRIC or developing world perspective on climate, on industrialization, and how the West relates to China. Check this out.
Depois, outra coisa que nós fizemos com os chineses foi na COP15 em Copenhague. Eu posso contar uma coisa para vocês. Eu cheguei na COP15, estava a Dilma e estava o Mink, que era o ministro do Meio Ambiente, e tinha uma lista de audiência comigo, Angela Merkel, Sarkozy, Gordon Brown, o Obama já tinha ligado 2 vezes, e eu não sabia porque que era importante. Então, eu comecei a marcar audiência, e o que todos eles queriam? Todos eles queriam que a gente aprovasse na COP15 de que a China era o demônio da poluição no planeta Terra. Sarkozy chegou para conversar comigo com uma indústria cinematográfica, tinha uns 30 câmeras, era para dar um show, o Lula acusando a China. Aí eu fiz várias reuniões e para todos eles eu dizia o seguinte, ó, eu sei que a China está poluindo. Agora, antes da China poluir, quem é que vai pagar a poluição histórica que vocês cometeram? Qual é? Qual é a comissão histórica da industrialização inglesa nos Estados Unidos? Vai jogar a culpa na China? Não.
This is incredibly important. I want to also draw this to the extraordinary work of the UK Labour Party. John McDonnell just put forward in his speech to the Labour Party conference, Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, he said, as we implement their own incredibly ambitious version of the Green New Deal, we pledge nearly no cost or outright free green technology transfer to historically colonized countries, because we recognize that UK industrial development, that isn't a moral claim, that's a historical reality, in part was built on a foundation of imperialism and colonialism, so we're just going to repay it. That's the politics, that's the actual historical reality that flows out of that analysis. And I thought that was very revealing. I mean, both of Lula's courage, and I think it's interesting because relative to, Chavez, he gets painted as much more conciliatory, but clearly he was willing to fight a lot of battles. But I think I think that perspective is like the best articulation of a lot of developing countries' arguments at global forums, particularly on climate, but even also in some of these new economic arguments and accusations about China. So it's important for us to understand. We're going to take a brief break, and then Mike Recine, he's host of the Sit Down. We're going to talk probably about the mafia a little bit, because that's kind of his brand. The other day, I swear to God, I was wearing an Adidas outfit, and this Russian guy said, "I like your style." Verbatim quote. And I said, I'm going to watch the Oliver Stone Putin interviews again. You people are misunderstood. And then we've got some dunking on Sam Harris, right? Did we get some Sam Harris sound? Okay, we're going to take a brief break. Mike Recine in a minute. Michael Brooks Show.
Just make sure you do it well and you do it with passion.
And they ended up finding themselves in this whole irony, and it's just kind of amusing.
That story is complete garbage.
Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Very excited to welcome back to the program, returning champion, host of The Sit Down with Mike Recine, stand-up comedian, Mike Recine.
Good to be back.
Mike, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
It's great to see you.
You too.
Jeffrey Epstein was CIA, right?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, tell me, I want to hear your Epstein theory. You do a crime podcast.
Yeah.
How are we already forgetting about, like, the most brazen global crime spree that happened in front of our faces, and then the guy committed suicide a couple of weeks ago?
And we did like 3 episodes on Epstein, and I had to, there was so much information to sift through, because you Google Epstein and it's mostly like, just
dentists.
No, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hack
there probably is a dentist somewhere named Jeffrey Epstein. There's got to be tons. Yeah.
Well, that's partially why he's Matt will find it. That's partially super producer Matlack.
Yeah.
That's partially why. I mean,
Jeffrey Epstein child dentist. There's probably like a bunch of them.
Oh man.
The same thing with remember the old Men's Warehouse commercials?
Yes.
When the guy was like, "You're gonna like the way you look." That guy's name was George Zimmer.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
and he
weird.
disappeared. I think right around like I thought he died, but he disappeared right around like 2013. I think.
Really?
Or 2012, 2013. Yeah.
You know what I was thinking? Because people remember that there was that like one of the Epstein things that they did. And I talked with Liz Franzik about how he wanted to. He had that like breeding thing in New Mexico, and he was supposedly like this like bizarre plan to like impregnate tons of women and like carry on his and we talked about how actually like if you get into like transhumanism and all these sick disgusting ideas floating around Silicon Valley oligarchs, like he basically just was like one of them, right? It wasn't really that unusual, but the dumb hacky bit that I couldn't help but having is like, it's 1,000 years from now and it's like I'm the Jeffrey Epstein, 10,000. I like the children in a slightly different age range. I have carpal tunnel syndrome. However, I'm much more skilled at racquetball.
Nice.
It's just this. I think it's just like the add insult to everything. The fact that he was just this like nebbish schmuck. It's just like, ugh.
Yeah.
It shouldn't matter, but it's like, Jesus.
And then there was that video that said that he had an egg-shaped penis.
Oh.
They asked him that in the so when they were interrogating him. I think this was like back in 2009.
That's so disgusting.
Yeah.
I know that's, but seriously, what's the theory? Because, okay, first you have a pedophile predator gets a light sentence. And it's like, okay, yeah, of course, that's how America works. 2-tier, triple-tier justice system. But then there's that line that I mean, Alex Costa straight up said, supposedly he was asked about it in the Trump transition. He said, I was told he was intelligence and to leave it alone. That is an undisputed quote that's just sitting there. So, like, what is your, I mean, honestly, like, all of the, you have to joke about it because it's so disgusting and evil and horrifying.
Yeah.
But really, though, like, this isn't something we should forget. And what is the theory? Like, honestly,
Yeah,
you did actual episodes on it.
Right. I mean, it's all there, but it's hard to find I mean, I read some articles from a girl named Whitney Webb, but I think a lot of her stuff got taken down. But I think it sounds like the CIA used sex to blackmail people. They would use sex with underage girls to blackmail, and that's it seems like, I mean, that seems like the simplest answer, that's what he was doing.
Do you think about the Barr family, Matt? I want some Matt Leck theorizing here. I mean, it's just, isn't it just literally like, even if it's all just a coincidence and it's all just social capital, he's hired by Bill Barr's dad.
Who is original, like, OG, OSS, like, pre-CIA.
Pre-CIA.
Yes. And later writes weird erotica about, like, sex slavery.
Sex slavery and space colonies.
And also hires Jeffrey Epstein to work.
It's like they're trying to get caught.
Yeah.
Or it's like Alex Jones used to say, like, they're doing these videos in public to taunt you. And you read about the Epstein case and you're like, they're doing this in public to taunt us.
Oh my God, thank you so much. Thank you, Alex Jones.
Well, conspiracy theories are always just like the dumbed down, like, literalized version of reality, right? Like the CIA was... And not even just in the 80s, the CIA is dealing with heroin traffickers in Afghanistan today. Mm-hmm. By the way, we just killed 30 nut farmers in Afghanistan, which, you know, that's like, you know, nobody pays attention to that, obviously. But like,
come on.
The version, no, but I'm just saying, like, there's like, okay, you know, is like an actual CIA agent, you know, going and setting up like a specific distribution network themselves to like do street level deals. I don't know. Actually, honestly, I think that's possible.
Yeah.
But you don't even need to, like, literally the same planes flowing weapons in and out of Central America, backing death squads through illegal allocations of funds, are bringing coke back in the United States. Like, that's 100% true.
Yeah.
So I don't know, you know, and then I guess Alex Jones would add, like,
do about it.
And there's nothing you can do about it. Alex Jones would add, like, the Bohemian Grove component.
Who was the journalist who covered that? I forget his name.
Gary Webb.
Gary Webb. I mean, there's another lesson from that whole scenario, which is how the media was complicit in squashing the story.
They not only
and
they,
drive him to. Did he drive him to
committed
suicide?
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I would say that's one I might put with some a little question mark as well. But even if he did commit suicide, I'm actually just reading a collection of Alexander Cockburn essays, and Cockburn writes about how, like, you know, even in the obituary, the New York Times basically has to go back to, like, yeah, I mean, this guy was crazy, you know, crazy asshole who broke, like, a story that, oh, by the way, actually basically the CIA inspector general essentially admitted to. But, you know, he was wrong. He was nuts.
Yeah.
Killed himself, loser.
Do you ever worry about being assassinated?
Do I worry about being assassinated? In some of my more grandiose moments, yes.
Yeah.
That's the goal, is to get important enough to get assassinated.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think when we hit like 6,000 patrons, I might get on a list.
Once we get into like the nihilistic money,
yeah,
you just get assassinated for the legacy.
Yeah.
There was actually a story I read once in Guatemala, and I shouldn't mention this because I don't remember any of the specifics.
This guy's got 40,000 YouTube subscribers. He's got to go.
Yeah. Excuse me, I have 77,000.
Nice. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
So actually, maybe yes. How dare you?
I'm sorry, dude. I should have known that. I don't know why these guys didn't brief me before I came in.
So CIA blackmail. Does it make, because you're a little romantic about the mafia when you read about like Epstein and stuff. Does it kind of get you back to like, hey, you know, Lucky Fabrizi was just trying to sell suits, and, you know, Sure, occasionally you have to break somebody's legs, but that's the neighborhood.
No, I don't think so. Because I think my parents hate the Clintons so much that this is how we like connect. If we're gonna fight about politics, we can at least go back to Epstein. And be
so you're like, Ma, Dad, the Civil Rights Act was good. They're like, no, it wasn't.
All right,
and
all right.
And they go,
everybody
all right,
calm down.
But the Clintons ran a global child molestation ring.
Yeah.
That's correct.
You're damn right they
You're
did.
damn right they did.
Thanks for doing my laundry.
Thanks for doing my laundry, Ma. Did you see the new Clinton body count update? Is that what it actually is? Is that what you talk when you talk about politics with your parents and you try to make peace? You talk about the Clintons.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to my brother about this because I was like, if you're gonna talk to Mom and Dad, you have to like talk about issues, but some,
like the Clintons.
Yeah, like Bill
it's
Clinton's
like issues like Bill Clinton being on a plane with Chris Tucker.
Yeah.
Going to help those poor. That's another thing I love. I shouldn't make all these horrible. I don't know about your parents, but one thing I do love about
it's pretty accurate.
It's pretty obvious, right? I love like the flip of like the rate. Like one sentence is like, and you need to send the police into those neighborhoods, like the most obscene racist. And then the next thing is like, and what the Clintons did to those poor people in Mozambique.
Yeah.
I remember one time when Hillary Clinton was running for president. I tweeted this literally like a Democracy Now! Segment, like, you know, totally like Amy Goodman, like, and in other news, nuns were killed by a CIA, blah, blah. And it was something, I don't remember what, but it was something disgusting the Clintons did in Haiti. I mean, the Clintons are just, Haiti in particular could really, it's like the micro case study of every, like it's the one example that tells you everything about how disgusting they really can be. And it was funny because, you know, I tweeted it out and, you know, it got like the, you know, lefty likes and then maybe one or two accounts of people who like did Haiti specific issues. And then one was like, America for America. Yeah, exactly. I was like, why does this guy care about Haiti? And it was all just like, you know what? You're goddamn right. I don't agree with you about everything, but what the Clintons did in a colonial occupied capacity to Haiti was absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah.
Like, all right,
that's how you build a revolution. Good. Yeah.
Right. I'm totally for a cross-boundary coalition to stop the Clintons' policies in Haiti. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was actually, Trump actually did that in Miami. People don't even remember that. He literally went, he was like, I was just in Little Haiti. And of course, the hypocrisy of this racist asshole, but I was just in Little Haiti and they are not happy. He did that one too. Yeah. They are not happy. What do you think about impeachment? Smart or not?
Yeah, I guess you have to do it, but it doesn't. I read a couple articles about it today, and it doesn't seem like I'm not that excited about it. It was hard for me to be, you know, it's hard for me to care.
Right?
Do you care?
No, I mean, now that they're doing it, I care about how it plays out. I'm not a complete nihilist. Like I think it's incredibly important. I mean, the number one priority right now is Bernie Sanders. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
harassing anyone who says anything against him.
Exactly.
Just till they kill themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just the online terror campaign to silence all voices that oppose Bernie. Yeah. I love, by the way, those pieces that are coming out. Like, I was chased off of the internet by Trump and Bernie.
And we'll do it again.
You're right. I love though, I think Matt Binder pointed this out though, that like they're actually operating, some of these arguments actually terrifyingly do sound like Trump. Because, you know, he said both sides, right?
Yeah.
And so you'll read like articles like, and it will be like the Trump people are tweeting like the most disgusting, like, you know, kill yourself, I hate you because you're trans, like all of this absolutely just grotesque. Everything violent. What?
No good.
No good. Very bad for you. And then it's like, and look at what the Bernie supporters said. And it's just like, could you please cite a citation the next time you say that, like, Bernie like hates, like Bernie hates people from Panama. And then it's, I got ran off of the internet by Trump and Sanders people. And it's like, not only is that insane and dishonest, it's actually like, do you think that maybe it's like, actually like a super problematic false equivalency that you're doing by like, by lying like that and exaggerating like that. I mean, I don't know. I know like everybody's, moods are up, but I see some of those things and it's like, and it's so incredible. I shouldn't even say they're not lying because it's actually in the article. You literally can read like atrocious, despicable comment next to, hey, I don't think that Bernie hated his parents and, I don't think that he wants, babies to shut the fuck up at his rallies.
Steal a college.
Yeah. I don't. Maybe could you provide a citation for that? It's like somebody, I forget who.
You're a bright guy, and I get most of my political opinions from you.
Sounds good.
And people like you. But Warren's like, she's like okay, right? She's not terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing,
she's like Professor McGonagall from Harry Potter, right? She's like Mary Poppins.
She's like Mary Poppins.
Kinda.
I think the one thing, if you're asking me seriously, that people could do that would be a mistake, and I say this as somebody who I don't have any time for any bullshit. Bernie is the best. If you're going to say that you're a democratic socialist or progressive, whatever, this is your choice. Please don't even, whatever. Don't even come at me with any nonsense. But I think people who just say like she's the same as Hillary Clinton, it's politically it's a trap and it's wrong.
Yeah,
it's inaccurate. I mean, she absolutely there's certain issues she's good on, and there's certain issues she's accomplished things on. And the thing is like I just want to say, and then we'll get back to messing around. When you say that, you're helping the Warren campaign because what you are doing is you are making it look like you're being disingenuous and dishonest, and you're making it look like I can make the case for Bernie all day, every day, and say that Warren is obviously not Hillary Clinton. She's, has a good record on certain areas of Wall Street reform, on certain areas of trade and taxes, and really stuck her neck out on things like bankruptcy. That's how she, that's all true. And I'll still make the argument on every aspect of foreign and domestic policy. So it's not only wrong, and it's a bad look, strategically, but it's weak.
Yeah.
It's unnecessary. Now, on the other hand, people are out here saying that, they're basically the same thing and ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, absurd. So that's the other pole of total disingenuity. They're very different things, and Bernie represents the democratic socialist and serious opportunity option.
Yeah. I was in Bed-Stuy recently, and I was on like Halsey Street in Lewis, and I saw a BMW, and there was a vanity license plate, and the license plate said send help, and there was a Warren bumper sticker on it. So I was like, this is kind of like who you people are. You bring your BMWs to Bed-Stuy.
Yeah. I mean look, you look at the numbers.
Read Harry Potter.
You read Harry Potter.
If you read Harry Potter, you suck.
Unless you're like under 15, I don't know.
That's my political analysis.
Yeah, yeah. Take a swig of beer after you say that. I like that. No, I remember I said a joke. I've been overusing it actually, but it was pretty funny. Where I said something like she's locked up the gluten sensitivity vote, and I remember somebody like. Because I will, I don't remember, it was either Twitter or YouTube, but somebody was like, I really wanted this video to help me convince people, but it's just so mean and dismissive. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? Like, in the course of that video where that joke was made, I talked about Brazil.
Yeah.
I talked about single payer. I talked about the difference between, canceling all student debt or not. And you are so narcissistically wrapped up. Like, if somebody like actually landed, and they don't do it that often because a lot of them are not funny, like a funny, Bernie bro joke.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say like,
and there's a lot of stuff you could say.
I can't listen.
They don't smell good.
Right. Well, actually, that's wrong. I smell great. And you're Italian. You probably smell fantastic. You probably smell like 5 showers, Axe.
Yeah, but I forget deodorant every once in a while.
You forget deodorant?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Dude, Jim Tan Laundry. Is that still a thing?
Some of them are named Jake Flores.
Oh, all right. Yeah, but Jake Flores, no. People should know. Jake Flores doesn't wear deodorant?
No, I'm just saying, like, if you want to make fun of Bernie Bros. But Jake made fun of me one time for selling pasta sauce.
Really?
So yeah.
I guess I need to broker a summit between you guys. Two friends of show.
It's all right.
All right. Let's make fun of Sam Harris a little bit.
Just let him know when he's ready to apologize. I'm ready to listen to him. By the way, I was going to bring your buddy Oliver in. I have a little dog,
Ollie,
a baby character, a carrier. And I was going to wear him on my thing.
I love Oliver,
but
he would have been too loud on air.
He would have barked, and yeah, he's a little unpredictable.
I love both of your dogs.
Thanks.
I also love is Deb still feeling Kamala?
No. We had a long talk about that.
Yeah.
We had a long talk about who this house supports. And I said, listen,
we support Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. You want to keep spending my money. You want to support. But I was thinking, you know how when you do this.
Oh, you want to go to Bloomingdale's and Sephora, but you don't want people to have health care?
Yeah.
Well, that's not how this household works.
Well, you seem to think that I like one of my dogs more than the other one, so I wanted to bring in Oliver and have him in a carrier. But I was thinking, when you do the Sam Cedar character, it's like the Jewish.
Sure.
I was thinking maybe the Michael Brooks character is a guy who's like, I'm not into like dog favoritism. Like we all need to come together and like support dogs equally, man. That's not right. I'm like,
So you're making me sound like a Warren supporter.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I get it. I see the angle.
Yeah.
Can I have some oat milk?
What's your birth sign?
What is your birth sign?
I thought I was a Gemini forever, but I'm a Cancer.
How did you make that disastrous mix-up?
Because I'm June 21st, so that's right on the cusp.
Okay.
But what I understand from somebody who knows a lot about it.
Who cleared it up for you?
Sarah Armour. You know her? Comedian? Yeah.
She sounds funny.
Yeah. She's good. She's a good egg.
No, I believe that. I'm just playing. Yeah. That's the obvious cheap line. What was I? Okay. Let's make fun of Sam Harris.
Yeah.
So in my book that is coming out, it's been submitted. You'll be hearing more about it very soon. I did an actual chapter where I dealt with this guy and his ideas and his thought experiments and blah, blah, blah. So in that context, I will deal with him. In this context, we will mainly just make fun of him. But I will just say, listening to Sam Harris, honestly, it doesn't surprise me because the same way he's talking about white supremacy is exactly the same. He's using similar narrative structures he's always used, which is that he's an ahistorical essentialist thinker who is, he's probably more rooted in his own biases and less aware of them of literally anybody in public life. I actually cannot think of a similar person, but
he might be the most irredeemable one too.
I agree.
Because Shapiro can be funny sometimes.
Shapiro can be funny.
Every once in a
while. You mean
Say,
unintentionally?
yeah.
Because I have definitely never seen Ben Shapiro be funny.
No, because one time he had this thing where me and Deb always quote it, where he's like, the left thinks that the more oppressed you are, the more right you have to speak. So if we could just find a little person who's a lesbian, transgender, they could rule us. We could have a new king of America.
Hey, that's pretty
kind of funny. Yeah,
it's not bad. But he's
him talking about Brett Kavanaugh's penis. That's funny.
Yeah, I haven't seen the penis. Where's the penis? Where's the penis? No one said anything about the penis. By the way, I'm not going to talk about this person, but I will just say that there is a former PragerU star who a lot of these people were eager to collaborate with, who we might have done a video on once, who his interpretation of the Ben Shapiro thing, I might be too loose about exploring Jewish humor, was one of the more anti-Semitic things, objectively anti-Semitic things I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
He donned a obscene Jewish character mask and then ranted about penises. That's all I'll say. You could look at it. All right, is this the penis
Well,
thing?
No, I don't think we should actually listen
Let's
to what
just
he says,
watch
but
him bobble his
If you
head.
just look at his head, it's like there's an element to like there's a string off camera that's trying to jerk him off.
It does look demonic.
Yeah.
To me, at least. All right. This is Sam Harris. Sam Harris talking about white supremacy-based terrorism reminds me of the old Onion headline where the president of the NRA is like, all right, we'll agree to do something about school shootings, but there has to be like 850 children killed, There, and I'm not talking injury. It has to be deaths. This is a guy who for years has said, you can erase thousands of years of human history. You don't need to know anything about politics, geography, anthropology, history. You don't need to just be a basic inquisitive human being and talk to a broad set of people. There's this book that I don't read in the original language. I've taken some inflammatory quotes from, and I've correlated it with a few polls whose methodology I probably don't even understand, and a couple of current events and all of my biases, and therefore there is Islam and terrorism, and that's it. And, you know, here's a thought experiment about nuking them. Here he is talking about white supremacy.
One question I have, though, is around this notion that a lone wolf is never a lone wolf.
Is the photo up?
We should always suspect
of the
that
cover,
a lone
the
wolf
delightful
is part of a larger movement. So, like, take the case of McVeigh, right? So we all know what it's like to see a white supremacist on television and, interviewed or given an opportunity to state his views, and they're not shy about stating these views. I mean,
that's a very dubious thing to say about white supremacists on TV, that maybe we should return to later.
Indeed.
On television and, interviewed or given an opportunity to state his views, and they're not shy about stating these views. I mean, they're proud of their racism, right? They want to use the platform to further spread these ideas. And we know what those vile chatterboxes are like. And then you have someone like McVeigh who, if he expressed any racism, I'm sure, there are things in his backstory that suggest he was racist, but I recently watched the one interview he gave from death row for 60 Minutes, and he didn't express anything like that there. And when given an opportunity to account for what he had done, he put it in terms that were really entirely focused on the misapplication of state power. I mean, he said, unlike the example you gave of the veteran who said, I killed communists over there, and why not kill them here? He gave a certainly less white supremacist gloss on what he had done. He said, listen, I was in Iraq and I killed people over there and I got medals for it. But, what was I doing over there killing people? That wasn't my country.
Then you come here and you blow up a few babies.
Yeah.
And I get the death penalty.
Yeah, we can skip.
I also just don't. I mean, the thing, though, is that McVeigh, it's just so disingenuous because, first of all, yes, McVeigh read the Turner Diaries, which is a quintessential white terrorism, white supremacist text, right? But also
maybe the most famous one.
Maybe the most famous one. So of course, Mr. You just have to read the hadiths doesn't do the basic background checks there. But actually, there's many interviews with Timothy McVeigh, and for whatever reason, yes, Timothy McVeigh has never emphasized a racial dimension of what he does. So what he's doing is he's ignoring the most salient piece of evidence and then just basically picking somebody who certainly would fit under right-wing anti-governmental terrorism, but was not racially fixated the same way you could talk about, as an example, the guy who shot up and murdered the people at the Sikh Gurdwara, as an example. So it doesn't even...
Well, this is like when he saw an interview with Tommy Robinson. He's like, well, you got to admit that interview was unobjectionable,
everything he
right?
said in that interview was reasonable. And of course, as we all know, proper intellectual work means that you never read the context, history, or setting for anything.
Anyway,
and if you do, that's unfair.
Baloo comes in here.
And coordinated through a movement. That's not all of them, but it's a lot of them. And we haven't done enough to understand what that is and why that's motivating people to violence. Now, McVeigh, so there's a couple of, let me just start with what we know about him. And I'll just start with a methodological distinction, which is historians a lot of the time really distrust what people say about something after the fact. We prefer to see what they did. And McVeigh's life gives us some evidence that his, public comments sort of don't show, including, as you mentioned, his affiliation with the Michigan militia. He also wrote letters to his sister saying he was going underground and encouraging her to continue above ground activism, and he was going to sort of go off the grid. He had attempted contacts with a whole bunch of different white power groups, including the Arizona Patriots, the National Alliance, which, by the way, is the one headed by the man who wrote the Turner Diaries, and the separatist compound at Elohim City, which had sheltered a whole bunch.
I'm sorry. I just want to say I didn't hear this. So I like that my initial instincts is tracking with the actual expert that Sam Harris is trying to distract with his nonsense.
That's actually Sam under that hood.
Actually, it's kind of a stylish it's a good look, and it breathes well.
So a lot of people would say that because I was in the hood of a Grand Dragon, automatically Sam Harris is racist. He's in the KKK. This is a total disaster and a smear.
The National Alliance, which, by the way, is the one headed by the man who wrote the Turner Diaries, and the separatist compound at Elohim City, which had sheltered a whole bunch of people on the lam who were members of the Order and other white power terrorist groups that were organized in leaderless resistance style. He chose the date of the bombing on the anniversary of the Waco siege. That's pretty well known, but also on the execution date of a prominent white power activist who had once targeted that same building in Oklahoma City. He once lived with somebody.
I just want to say, all I know about this podcast, and I don't know much about Kathleen Belew, although I think she's like a real historian. So props to Harris for having a real historian on.
She was on MR. She was good.
I don't remember that.
It was a vacation show.
Oh, okay. I do see, though, I think Ina from Polite Conversations, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe she tweeted out that apparently Sam said in one of his laborious, those 1,000-minute introductions or something where he's just like, but before we get to it, somebody tweeted that, something, blah, 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 that Kathleen Belew was pretty woke, and that next week he'd be talking with Barry Weiss.
Yeah, he said that after the interview.
That's amazing, though. You talk to an actual historian who is able to just not even argue with you, but just be like, yeah, basically, Sam, you're literally missing all salient information here. And then it's just like, yeah, I don't know. But next week, I'll be talking to a brain dead moron from the New York Times, and we will both be patting each other on the back, pretending simultaneously that white supremacy isn't an issue, and that also saying that Palestinians possess respiratory systems is an existential threat to Jews everywhere. Looking forward to that one.
The thing about it, where does Sam get off saying that white supremacists are strictly forthright about their views on media? I think we should do an impromptu Hitchens throwback here when he had Tom Metzger on.
Oh, I like it.
Here's just a part of it. This whole thing is actually very good, but this part is funny.
If Hitchens could have redeemed, not entirely, because he's got he does, if we're being real, between Afghanistan and Iraq, he has a lot of blood and he enabled a lot of stuff. But he did a lot of great things too, and he was a charm and a raconteur. And if he was alive and was just here to bully Sam Harris, he would be making up a lot of ground.
So you don't care. In other words, so if you were told it was true, you wouldn't say the person saying so was a liar and a prisoner of Jewish propaganda.
I doubt.
You're not even a Holocaust revisionist.
Well, history is not history anymore. It's by special lobbyist groups that come in and try to knock each other to get certain ideas in. So the fact that they spend so much time on the issue is questionable in itself.
Will you allow me to say, abuse my privilege and say I'm a bit disappointed? I was kind of looking forward to this, and now you're disappointing me. You don't seem to have the cowardice of your convictions, or courage is perhaps the word I mean.
Let's set the
Look, we've got your father on the line who's said to be a real tough guy. Mr. Metzger Sr., can we get you in with us?
Yeah, sure. Very clever.
How do you think the boy's shaping up?
Well, you're a very clever interrogator, sort of a second best Bill Buckley, but you're trying. I mean, you
certainly know how to hurt a guy, I'll say that for a start. I was wondering how you thought the boy was doing.
Hitler. I mean, is there anything else in the world besides Jews to talk about?
Cucked his father,
as I said, to your firstborn, if that's what he is, anyway, your son, Mr. Metzger. It's a question that need only be asked once, as long as it's answered. Would you accept that as fair?
What question is this?
If you force me to restate it, you can't complain it keeps coming up, can you? I want to know, since your organization simultaneously says the Holocaust is a myth, but appears to support those who think it was a jolly good thing, which of those two things you think yourself?
Well, what we have said is an exaggerated, the figures are exaggerated, and the facts are showing that to be true as each year passes by. But our concern is with the third world invasion of this nation that's robbing and stripping.
Donald Trump, keep going.
the Euro-American of everything he's got.
But you say that the Jews, you say the Jews are behind all that.
All your time talking about something that happened 50 years ago.
I don't think I need to waste.
I don't care what happened to the Jews.
See, in other words, not forthright.
Right.
He had to bring his dad on, and his dad was a little bit more forthright and still not there.
Yeah, but still a punk and still not what they're saying behind the scenes. Exactly, which is another reason that the idea that you like listening, because I listened to Polite Conversations with Ina, her like longer term dissection of this, and she plays like Sam Harris being like legitimate, like, and always like, I hate Trump, but basically like, I hate Trump because he's dumb, right? Like the most superficial and just like wanky reason to not like
aesthetic
Trump, right?
reasons.
It's all aesthetics. And then, oh, and he'll say that he's immoral or whatever, but then like really be like, you know, it's like we need to dissect whether or not telling the woman in the squad to go home was actually racist.
He hates Trump because Trump had sex. He's just mad at him.
He hates Trump because Trump has a little like actual libidinal energy and can occasionally provide a little bit of fun. All right, folks, here's what we're going to do. We are going to go to the post game where we're going to play this new incredible ad for this shame on Jim from The Office.
Mm-hmm.
Shame on Bunk from The Wire. This is really one of the most disgusting pieces and truly embarrassing, down to the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young cover. It's like embarrassing. It's going to be embarrassing for us to watch this ad together, being in the same room, because it's so embarrassing. This new Amazon war propaganda. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about Hollywood's relationship to the national security state. But first, of course, we're going to do the debunk with Ben Burgess, and we've got a bunch of sound to get to. You know what it is. Become a patron today, patreon.com/TMBS. Mike, tell all the people all the ways they can find you in the sit down. I love the sit down.
Yeah, check out my podcast, The Sit Down. It's a podcast. It's about organized crime, but we cover a lot of different stuff. We talk about corporate corruption. We talked about Jeffrey Epstein. Whatever kind of falls under that umbrella. It's a comedy podcast, so we try to keep it light and fun while giving you
achieve it. Can I say something? And I'm not sucking up here, but more Deb.
More Deb? Yeah.
Deb's funny.
Everybody
the
likes
dynamic
her.
Between you and Deb is very funny.
Okay.
I like when she goes, all right, wait, so what's happening here?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and I get to explain.
And you're always just like, no, so he was the Iceman. And he was not the famous Iceman. He was, because that's another part I like about the show now, is that now you're down to like, so they were doing silverware heists in Delaware.
Yeah. I know.
Which is actually, no, but that's good that you're doing that you're getting onto the corporate and the political stuff. It's great.
Thanks.
I love that show.
We're engaged now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Mazel tov.
Thanks.
All right, folks, patreon.com/TMBS. This Sunday, Ken Klippenstein talking about the FBI identifying, quote unquote, black identity extremism as a national security threat. Of course, they mean activism against police violence and killing of African Americans. Also, a lot of deaths in ICE custody were preventable. And then Ken and I actually have a really good time talking about the Kennedys, Massachusetts, and making fun of this current Kennedy who's running against Ed Markey, and why he's all of the bad things of entitled nepotism, but none of the fun glamour of like, we're all dunking on the Kennedy that's running against Ed Markey, but he's never going to be in a room being like, you make sure that fucking podcast is shut down and get me Marilyn on the phone.
Yeah.
Like none of the cool stuff. It's all just the trash nepotism. All right, folks. We'll see you in the postgame.